I'm Victoria, 34 female. I live alone in a small but cozy apartment in the city, where I work as an archivist for the Municipal Historical Society. My life is quiet, ordered, and revolves around preserving the past, a passion that has always felt more like a calling than a job. But the one piece of history I could never seem to properly catalog or understand was my own family, especially when they decided to erase me from the present. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The last Saturday of November. For as long as I could remember, that day was sacred. It was the designated date for our family's annual pre-holiday holler, a tradition started by my late grandmother. It wasn't just a gathering, it was an institution. It was the one day a year where all the simmering tensions, the petty squabbles, and the unspoken rivalries were supposed to be set aside in favor of my grandmother's famous turkey pot pie and a loud, chaotic gift exchange. Since she passed, my mother, Susan, had taken up the mantle, hosting the event at the old family home where I grew up. The house itself felt like a repository of memories, each room holding echoes of laughter, tears, and the steady, comforting presence of family. Or so I thought. My job as an archivist means I thrive on consistency, on records, on the immutable truth of dates and events. The last Saturday of November was a cornerstone of my personal calendar, a fixed point in the turning wheel of the year. I looked forward to it with a mixture of anticipation and mild dread, as any adult with a complicated family does. The dread came mostly from my older sister, Jessica. At 40, she was a successful real estate agent with a husband, 2 perfect kids, and a condescending smile that could curdle milk. She had always treated me as the quirky one, the quiet bookworm who didn't quite fit into her world of parent-teacher association meetings and high-stakes property sales. Our relationship was a delicate dance of polite inquiries and thinly veiled criticisms. She'd ask about my dusty old papers at work, and I'd ask about her latest commission, both of us knowing we were speaking different languages. Our mother, Susan, a retired nurse, was the family's self-appointed peacekeeper. Her method of keeping peace, however, was to placate Jessica at all costs. Jessica was the louder wheel, the one who demanded more grease, and Mom was always there with the can. If Jessica wanted the last slice of pie, Mom would say, "Oh, Victoria, you don't mind, do you? You watch your figure so well." If I expressed an opinion that clashed with Jessica's, Mom would gently steer the conversation away, patting my hand and saying, "Let's not get into a debate, dear." It wasn't malicious, I told myself. It was just easier for her. But over the years, easier had started to feel a lot like erasure. This year felt different, though. I was determined to connect. A few months prior, I had spent weeks painstakingly restoring a box of my grandmother's old photo albums and 8 films I'd found in the attic. I digitized the films, carefully restored the faded colors of the photographs, and compiled everything into a beautiful digital presentation. It was a tribute to our family's history, to the very woman who had started this tradition. I imagined us all gathered in the living room, the lights dimmed, watching flickering images of our younger, happier selves. I envisioned my mom tearing up, Jessica dropping her cynical facade for a moment, and all of us remembering that, beneath the layers of adult complications, we were family. I bought a new portable projector and a screen, packed them carefully, and set them aside for the big day. It felt like a peace offering, a bridge I was building back to them. The planning for the holler was, as always, a group effort coordinated via a family group chat, a digital space dominated by Jessica's rapid-fire messages and my mom's emoji-laden replies. "Aunt Carol is bringing her green bean casserole," one message would read. "Who's on dessert duty? Not Victoria, unless she wants to bring that weird avocado chocolate thing again. LOL. I ignored the jab. I volunteered to bring a cranberry orange glazed ham, a complex recipe I'd been practicing for weeks. "Sounds lovely, dear," my mom replied, followed by a string of heart emojis. Jessica's response was a simple, sterile thumbs-up emoji. A week before the event, I sent a message to the group. Hey everyone, just confirming the plan for next Saturday. I'm so excited to show you all something I've been working on. Should I bring the ham hot, or is there oven space to warm it up when I get there? The response was silence. Hours ticked by. Usually my mom would reply within minutes. Jessica, even with just an emoji, was typically prompt. I sent a follow-up message a day later. Just checking in on the oven space question. Let me know. Again, nothing. I started to feel a familiar knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. This was a classic Jessica move, the strategic freeze-out. She'd ignore a text or a call for a few days to create a sense of unease, to subtly remind you that communication happened on her terms. Finally, on Tuesday, 4 days before the gathering, I called my mom directly. Hi, Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice light. I was just calling about the holler on Saturday. I haven't heard back from anyone. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, a hesitation that felt thick with unspoken words. Oh, honey, of course. We're so excited to see you, she said, her voice a little too bright, a little too cheerful. Don't worry about the oven space. Just bring the ham and we'll figure it out. It will be wonderful. Her reassurance felt hollow, practiced. Okay, I said slowly. Is everything all right? Everyone seems quiet. Everything is fine, she chirped. Just a busy week for everyone, you know how it is. Jessica is swamped with work and I've been running errands. Don't you worry your pretty little head about a thing. We'll see you Saturday at 2 p.m. just like always. It's like always. The words should have been comforting, but they landed with a thud. Something was off. I could feel it in the carefully constructed cheerfulness of her tone, in the deafening silence from the group chat. I tried to push the feeling down, chalking it up to my own anxiety. Why would this year be any different? It was tradition. It was the last Saturday of November. It was set in stone. I even checked the calendar on my phone, a beautifully illustrated one my cousin Leo, the chef, had designed. There it was, November 29th, a big red circle around the date labeled Family Holler. I had put it there myself months ago. Traditions were the anchors of a family, the sturdy ropes that held you together through choppy waters. Ours, I believed, was unbreakable. But I was about to find out that some traditions aren't meant to anchor you, they're meant to weigh you down until you are forced to let go. And I would soon learn that the heaviest weights are the ones you can't see. The days leading up to the holler were filled with a low-grade hum of dread I couldn't shake. It was a dissonant note under the melody of my excitement about the photo album project. The silence in the group chat continued, a gaping void where there should have been cheerful banter and logistical squabbles. My messages remained unread by Jessica, though the app showed she had been online. It was a deliberate act of ignoring someone, a digital cold shoulder that felt more insulting than an angry reply. I tried to focus on my work, losing myself in the crisp, dry scent of old paper and the quiet solitude of the archives. Here, history was clear. Events were documented, dated, and cross-referenced. There was no room for ambiguity, no space for the kind of emotional gaslighting that my family, particularly Jessica, had perfected into an art form. I decided to reach out to my cousin Leo. He was my age, and while we weren't incredibly close, we shared a certain outsider status in the family. He was a chef, a creative soul who had eschewed a traditional career path to follow his passion for food. Jessica often referred to him as the culinary experimenter, a backhanded compliment that simultaneously praised his talent and dismissed his life choices as a frivolous phase. Leo was usually the most level-headed of the bunch, a calm harbor in the storm of my mother's anxieties and my sister's ambitions. I sent him a private message. Hey Leo, looking forward to Saturday. Any idea what's up with the group chat? It's a ghost town. His reply came back almost instantly. Hey Vic, yeah, it's been quiet. I think Jess has been slammed with a big house closing. Don't worry about it. See you Saturday. It was a plausible explanation, and for a moment the knot in my stomach loosened. Of course. Jessica was a shark in the real estate world. A big closing would consume her. It made sense. But then, a few hours later, I saw something that made the knot tighten again, colder and harder than before. Jessica posted a story on her social media page. It was a picture of a lavish lunch spread at a trendy downtown restaurant. Salads, artisan bread, glasses of white wine. The caption read, midweek strategy session with my favorite collaborator. And there, across the table from her, was my mom, Susan, beaming at the camera. It wasn't the lunch itself that bothered me, it was the casual secrecy of it all. Mom had told me she was running errands. Jessica was supposedly swamped with work. Yet here they were, having a leisurely, celebratory lunch together, a strategy session. What were they strategizing? The timing felt pointed, a direct contradiction of the excuses I'd been fed. I felt a familiar sting of exclusion, the childhood feeling of being the last one picked for the team. I was the afterthought, the one who didn't need to be included in the real family discussions. I closed the app, my thumb hovering over the screen. I wanted to send the screenshot to Leo to ask him if this seemed normal, but I stopped myself. I didn't want to be the dramatic one, the one who reads too much into things. That was the role they had assigned me, and I was tired of playing it. Instead, I threw myself into preparing the ham. I bought the freshest ingredients, the finest spices. I followed the recipe with the precision of a historian verifying a primary source. The act of cooking, of creating something nourishing and beautiful, was a balm to my frayed nerves. This ham, I thought, would be my olive branch. It would be so delicious, so undeniably perfect, that it would transcend all the awkwardness and silence. It would be a testament to my effort, my love, my desire to belong. On Friday, the day before the gathering, I decided to do one last thing. I wanted to get a specific brand of sparkling cider that my grandmother had always loved. The only place that sold it was a small gourmet shop near my mother's house. I figured I could swing by, pick it up, and maybe even drop in on my mom for a quick, casual visit. A pre-party check-in. It would be a way to dispel the strange atmosphere, to prove to myself that my anxiety was unfounded. I called her first. The phone rang and rang before finally going to voicemail. "Hi, Mom, it's me. I'm going to be in your neighborhood running an errand and thought I'd pop by for a few minutes. Hope that's okay. See you in a bit." The 30-minute drive to my childhood home was filled with a strange mix of nostalgia and apprehension. The familiar streets, the old oak trees lining the sidewalks, it all felt the same, yet different, as if I were looking at it through a distorted lens. When I pulled onto her street, I saw Jessica's oversized SUV parked in the driveway. A flicker of irritation went through me. Of course, she was here. The swamped, real estate agent seemed to have plenty of time for Mom this week. I parked on the street and walked up the familiar stone path. As I got closer, I could hear voices from the backyard, muffled but distinct. Laughter. It sounded like several people. I walked around the side of the house, following the sound, and then I saw them. Through the slats of the high wooden fence, I could see a gathering on the back patio. My mom, Jessica, her husband Tom, their kids, my Aunt Carol, my Uncle Robert, even Leo, they were all there. A small, intimate group gathered around the patio table, which was laden with food. It wasn't a feast, but it was a meal. They were talking, laughing, sharing a moment I was not a part of. My heart hammered against my ribs. I felt like a spy, an intruder in my own family's life. I backed away slowly, my feet silent on the grass. What was this? A pre-gathering gathering? Why wasn't I invited? I got back in my car, my hands trembling. I sat there for a long time, staring at the house. The laughter from the backyard felt like a physical blow. I thought about marching up to the door, about confronting them, but my courage failed me. The fear of their reaction, the feigned surprise, the dismissive explanations, was too much to bear. "Oh, Victoria, we were just having a quick get-together. It was a last-minute thing," Jessica would say, her eyes glittering with insincere apology. "We didn't want to bother you," my mom would add, patting my arm. I had heard those lines before. They were the well-worn tools they used to manage my feelings, to smooth over the cracks in our family's foundation. I drove home in a daze, the sparkling cider forgotten. The whispers I had been sensing all week had become a roar, and the door to my family felt not just closed, but locked. And I was standing on the wrong side. I woke up on Saturday morning feeling hollowed out. The image of my family laughing together on the patio was burned into my mind. I tried to reason with myself, to find a logical explanation. Maybe it was a birthday I'd forgotten. Maybe it was a planning session for a surprise for someone else. But no matter how many scenarios I ran through my head, none of them felt right. The secrecy, the ignored texts, my mom's strained cheerfulness, It all pointed to something deliberate. Despite the gnawing feeling in my gut, I clung to the one solid thing I had. The plan, the gathering was today. Saturday, at 2 p.m. My mom had confirmed it on the phone. Traditions die hard, but my hope, I was discovering, died even harder. I spent the morning on autopilot. I put the final glaze on the ham and baked it to a perfect, glistening mahogany. The sweet and savory aroma filled my small apartment, a stark contrast to the bitter taste in my mouth. I carefully packed the projector and the screen, along with the restored digital pH. Odos on a small laptop. I wrapped a host gift for my mother, a beautiful orchid I knew she'd love. I dressed with care, choosing a warm sweater and comfortable jeans, an outfit that said festive but relaxed. I was trying to project an image of normalcy, hoping that if I acted like everything was fine, it would be. At 1:30 p.m., I loaded everything into my car. The ham sat in a thermal carrier on the passenger seat, radiating warmth. The 45-minute drive was a blur of traffic and intrusive thoughts. Was I overreacting? Was I the crazy one, the overly sensitive daughter who created drama where there was none? This was the narrative Jessica had spun about me for years. Victoria feels things so deeply, she'd say to relatives, a statement that sounded like a compliment but was meant as a diagnosis. It was her way of invalidating my feelings, of framing them as an overreaction rather than a legitimate response to her behavior. I pulled into my parents' driveway at exactly 2:00 p.m. The first thing I noticed was the emptiness. There were no other cars, not Jessica's SUV, not my aunt's minivan, not Leo's beat-up sedan. The house, a sprawling two-story colonial that was usually buzzing with energy on holiday, was silent. No lights were on in the front windows, no wreath on the door. A cold, hard dread, more potent than anything I'd felt before, seized me. This wasn't just quiet. This was deserted. I got out of my car, leaving the ham and the gifts behind. I walked up the stone path, my footsteps echoing in the unnerving silence. I rang the doorbell. The familiar chime sounded startlingly loud. I waited. Nothing. I rang it again, holding the button down longer this time. Still nothing. I tried the doorknob. Locked. I peered through the front window, cupping my hands around my eyes to block the glare. The living room was dark and tidy. Too tidy. There were no signs of a party being prepared. No extra chairs, no festive decorations, no scent of cooking. It was just a house, empty and still. Panic began to bubble in my chest. Had something happened? A family emergency? I pulled out my phone and called my mom. It went straight to voicemail. I called Jessica. Straight to voicemail, I called Leo. Straight to voicemail. A wave of nausea washed over me. It was one thing to be ignored via text, but for everyone's phone to be off, that felt coordinated. Sinister. I stood on the porch, my mind racing. Maybe they had moved the party to a different location, a restaurant or Jessica's house. But why wouldn't they have told me? My mom's words from our phone call echoed in my ears. We'll see you Saturday at 2 p.m., just like always. It had been a lie. A cold, calculated lie. I walked back to my car, the reality of the situation beginning to sink in. I had been deliberately excluded. They had changed the plan, changed the entire day, probably, and had not only failed to tell me, but had actively misled me. My mother, the person who was supposed to be my safe harbor, had looked me in the eye, figuratively speaking, and lied to my face. The pain of it was sharp and breathtaking, a shard of ice lodging itself in my heart. I thought of the perfectly cooked ham in its carrier, the projector I was so excited to share, the orchid on the back seat. They were all symbols of my effort, my hope, my foolish belief that I still mattered. I sat in my driver's seat, staring at the empty house, and felt a profound and crushing loneliness. It was a loneliness that went beyond simply being alone. It was the specific, targeted loneliness of being rejected by the very people who were supposed to love you unconditionally. I was an archivist without an archive, a daughter without a family, a keeper of traditions that no one else cared to uphold. All the small slights, the casual dismissals, the years of feeling like an outsider, they all coalesced into this one moment of stark, brutal clarity. I wasn't just the forgotten daughter, I was the disposable one. And then, as the initial shock gave way to a deep, burning anger, a notification lit up my phone screen. It was a new post from Jessica. My hands shaking, I opened the app. The picture was a huge group selfie. There they were, all of them. My mom, Jessica, her family, my aunts, uncles, cousins, even Leo. They were all squeezed together in what was clearly Jessica's newly renovated living room. They were wearing festive sweaters, holding glasses of wine, and grinning from ear to ear. The room was decorated, a fire was blazing in the hearth, and a mountain of presents was piled in the corner. The caption, posted just minutes ago, read, "The pre-holiday holler is off to an amazing start. So wonderful to be surrounded by everyone we love. Family is everything." And beneath the photo, a timestamp. It wasn't from today, Saturday. It was from yesterday, Friday. The gathering I had seen through the fence at my mother's house wasn't a pre-party. It was the party. They had moved the entire tradition, the saw. Cred Unbreakable last Saturday of November to Friday, and they had all played along. They had gathered, celebrated, and posted about it online, all while knowing I would be driving here today, ham in tow, to stand on the porch of an empty house. The profound loneliness was crushing, but then I looked at that picture again, at their smiling, treacherous faces, and the sadness began to curdle into something else. Something hard and sharp and resolute. They thought I was disposable. It was time to show them what happens when you throw something away that you should have kept. The drive home was a fugue state. The vibrant autumn colors of the trees lining the highway seemed mocking in their brilliance. I didn't cry. The pain was too deep for tears. It had settled into a cold, heavy stone in my chest. The smiling faces in Jessica's photo were seared into my brain, surrounded by everyone we love. The wording was a surgical strike, designed to inflict maximum damage. It wasn't just an omission, it was a declaration. I was not part of the everyone. When I got back to my apartment, the smell of the roasted ham hit me as soon as I opened the door. It was the scent of wasted effort, of misplaced love. I took the thermal carrier, walked it directly to the kitchen, and dumped the entire, perfect ham into the trash. It was a visceral, cathartic act. I did the same with the orchid. I didn't want any symbols of my foolish hope in my home. The last thing I unpacked was the projector and the laptop with the restored family memories. I placed them on my dining table and just stared at them. This project, which had started as a bridge to my family, now felt like a monument to my own naivete. For the rest of the weekend, I was a ghost in my own apartment. I didn't answer my phone, which remained ominously silent anyway. No one called to check on me. No "oops, we forgot to tell you" text, no fake apologies. The silence was their confirmation. They knew what they had done and they were comfortable with it. They had successfully excised me, and now they were waiting for me to just fade away. But the archivist in me, the part that craves order and truth, refused to let it go. I wasn't going to fade away. I was going to investigate. I needed to understand not just what they did, but why. I needed a record. I needed evidence. My investigation began on Monday morning. I started with Leo. He was my only potential weak link, the only one who had ever shown a sliver of discomfort with Jessica's domineering ways. I didn't call him. I sent a carefully worded text, feigning confusion rather than accusation. "Hey Leo. So, I'm super embarrassed about this, but I must have gotten my dates completely mixed up. I showed up at Mom's on Saturday for the holler, and no one was there. Did I miss a memo about it being on Friday?" I crafted the message to be as non-confrontational as possible, giving him an easy out to tell me the truth. His reply came a few minutes later, and it was a gut punch. "Oh man, Vic, that's awful. I'm so sorry. Yeah, it was on Friday. Jessica sent out an email a few weeks ago about the date change. Did you not get it?" An email. The lie was so simple, so plausible. Of course, the busy, important real estate agent would use email, not the family group chat, to make a major change. It was a classic corporate maneuver applied to family dynamics, designed to create a paper trail that could be used to blame the victim. "Check your spam folder," he added, clearly trying to be helpful, unaware he was twisting the knife. I knew there was no email. I had searched every folder in my inbox, spam, trash, promotions, before I even texted him. The email was a fiction, a cover story they had all agreed upon. Leo, my kind, creative cousin, had either been duped or he was in on it. At that moment, it didn't matter which. He was part of the deception. The next piece of the puzzle came from an unlikely source: social media. While I was not friends online with most of my extended family, I kept my digital footprint small. I did have a cousin on my dad's side, Sarah, who was friends with Jessica. I navigated to Sarah's page and started scrolling. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. There were more pictures from the party at Jessica's house. Group shots, candid photos of people laughing. And then I saw it. A photo of my mother, Susan, standing in Jessica's kitchen. She was holding up a perfect, glistening, cranberry-orange glazed ham. My ham, or rather, a ham made from my recipe. In the comments below, my Aunt Carol had written, "Susan, this ham is divine, you've outdone yourself." My mother's reply was right below it. "Thank you, Carol. It's an old family recipe I decided to revive." My blood ran cold. She hadn't just lied to me. She hadn't just excluded me. She had stolen from me. She had taken my contribution, the one thing I had offered to bring, and passed it off as her own. She had replaced me, not just my present. See, but my very effort. This wasn't a simple oversight. This was a coup. They hadn't just moved the party, they had rewritten the guest list and the menu, ensuring every trace of me was gone. Why? The why was the piece I was missing. It couldn't just be about me being the quirky one. This level of coordinated cruelty had to have a deeper root. My archivist instincts took over. I needed primary sources. I thought back over the past year, looking for a catalyst, a moment when the familial climate had shifted from chilly to Arctic. And then I remembered. About 6 months ago, my dad's father, my grandpa Joe, had passed away. In his will, he had left his small but valuable collection of antique maps to me. He and I had shared a passion for history, and he knew that as an archivist, I would care for them properly. The collection was worth a fair amount of money, but to me, its sentimental value was immeasurable. At the time, Jessica had made a strange comment. "Maps," she'd scoffed. "What are you going to do with a bunch of old, dusty maps?" I had explained their historical significance and their monetary value. A flicker of something, greed, jealousy, had crossed her face before she masked it with a dismissive shrug. "Well, as long as they make you happy," she'd said, the implication being that they were useless to anyone practical like her. My mother had been there, and she'd rushed to smooth things over. "It's what your grandfather wanted, Jessica. Let's be happy for your sister." Could it be that simple? Was this elaborate, cruel act of exclusion motivated by a box of old maps? It seemed petty, almost absurd. But with Jessica, money and status were everything. She saw the world in terms of assets and liabilities. The maps were an asset, and they had been given to me, not her. It was a slight to her perceived status as the more successful, more deserving daughter. My mom, in her typical fashion, would have absorbed Jessica's resentment and, in her misguided attempt to keep the peace, would have sided with her. Excluding me from the family gathering, a tradition I cherished, would have been Jessica's way of reasserting her dominance, of punishing me for receiving something she felt entitled to. It was a power play, a way of showing me that while I might have the maps, she had the family. She controlled the narrative. She controlled who belonged. The fake email, my mother stealing my recipe, it was all part of the performance, a meticulously constructed play designed to showcase my irrelevance. The deceit wasn't just about hiding the truth from me. It was about creating a new truth for everyone else, a truth in which I simply didn't exist. And they had all, willingly or not, played their parts. For a week, I let the anger simmer. It was a clean, purifying fire, burning away the hurt and sadness and leaving behind a core of cold, hard clarity. They had built a narrative around me, the overly sensitive, dramatic, forgetful sister who couldn't even keep track of a simple email. They had used their version of the truth as a weapon. As an archivist, I knew that the person who controls the records controls the history. Jessica had tried to rewrite our family's history. I decided it was time to present a revised edition. My revenge wouldn't be loud or explosive. That's what Jessica would expect. She'd want a tearful, hysterical phone call that she could record and play for the family as proof of my instability. No, my response would be quiet, meticulous, and devastating in its precision. It would be an event, documented and witnessed. The cornerstone of their betrayal was the pre-holiday holler, the tradition they had stolen and repurposed. So my plan would revolve around creating a new tradition, one that would expose their lies and, more importantly, build something better in its place. I decided to host my own event. I called it the Friends and Found Family Thanksgiving. The date was crucial. I scheduled it for the Saturday after Thanksgiving, the very day our family holler was supposed to have been. My guest list was the first step. It would not include my mother, Jessica, or her family. Instead, I invited people who had become my real family over the years, my two closest friends from college, a few wonderful colleagues from the Historical Society, and my elderly neighbor, Mr. Henderson, who had lived alone since his wife passed. And then, I made a calculated decision. I invited the extended family members who I felt were more like bystanders than active conspirators in Jessica's plot. Aunt Carol and Uncle Robert, another cousin, and most importantly, Leo. I needed witnesses. I needed people who had been at Jessica's party to be at mine. I didn't send an email. I sent beautiful, custom-printed invitations designed by a freelance artist I knew. The invitation was for a special Thanksgiving dinner and a celebration of history and new beginnings. It mentioned a catered meal and a special presentation. 2. Leo, I added a personal note. Leo, I know things have been weird. It would mean the world to me if you came. I'm having the dinner professionally catered, but I'd be honored if you'd consider making one of your amazing desserts. I need your support. I was banking on his guilt and his good heart. Appealing to his talent as a chef was a strategic move. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of planning. I hired a small catering company to create a magnificent feast, far more elaborate than our usual potluck. I wanted the atmosphere to be one of warmth, generosity, and effortless elegance, a stark contrast to the closed-off, cliquey vibe of Jessica's gathering. I decorated my apartment with tasteful, festive decor. I wanted my space to feel like a sanctuary. The most important part of my plan, however, was the special presentation. I took the digitized family films and photos, the project I had been so excited to share at the holler, and began to edit them. But I didn't just edit them for nostalgia. I edited them for impact. I wove together photos and video clips, creating a timeline of our family's traditions. There were clips of my grandmother, vibrant and laughing, explaining why she started the holler. There were photos of my sister and me as children, inseparable and happy. Then I carefully inserted new elements. I took screenshots of the family group chat, showing my unanswered questions about the party. I took a screenshot of my phone log, showing my call to my mother on that Tuesday. I recorded a voiceover, my voice calm and steady, narrating the sequence of events. On Tuesday, November 25th, I spoke with my mother to confirm the details for the gathering on Saturday, the 29th. My voice would say over an image of the phone log. She assured me the time and date were correct. Saturday at 2 p.m., just like always. Then I incorporated the evidence of their deceit. I took a high-resolution screenshot of Jessica's social media post from that Friday, the group selfie with the caption about being with everyone we love. I followed it with a photo I'd taken myself that Saturday, a picture of my mother's dark, empty house taken from my car. The contrast was stark and undeniable. Finally, I added the screenshot of my mother taking credit for my ham recipe. The final piece of the presentation was the epilogue. I included recent photos of the people in the room, my friends, my colleagues, Mr. Henderson. The last slide was a simple quote I had found. Family is not just about blood. It's about who is willing to hold your hand when you need it the most. The entire presentation was about 8 minutes long. It was factual, devoid of angry rhetoric, and laid out the truth with the irrefutable clarity of a historical record. I loaded it onto the laptop and connected it to the projector. The day of my party arrived. My apartment was filled with the scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon. My friends and colleagues arrived, bringing warmth and laughter. Mr. Henderson came bearing a bottle of wine, his eyes twinkling. Then, my family started to arrive. Aunt Carol and Uncle Robert looked slightly confused, as if they weren't sure what to expect. And then Leo walked in. He looked nervous, but he was carrying the most beautiful pumpkin cheesecake I had ever seen. He met my eyes, and I saw a flicker of shame and apology. "This looks amazing, Vic," he said quietly, gesturing around the room. "Thank you for coming, Leo," I replied, my voice even. The stage was set. The audience was assembled. The feast was ready, but the main course had yet to be served. The dinner was a resounding success. The atmosphere was light and joyful, a world away from the tense, performative cheerfulness of my family's usual gatherings. My friends mingled effortlessly with my relatives. My colleagues from the Historical Society were enthralled by my Uncle Robert's stories about the city in the old days. Leo, after his initial nervousness, seemed to relax, talking passionately about flavor profiles with one of my friends who was a food blogger. It was a beautiful tableau of connection, of a community I had built for myself. I watched it all unfold with a sense of calm purpose. My aunt and uncle, however, were clearly on edge. They kept glancing at the door, as if expecting my mother and Jessica to walk in at any moment. During a lull in the conversation, Aunt Carol leaned toward me and whispered, "Victoria, this is all so lovely. But, is Susan not coming? Or Jessica?" Her voice was laced with confusion. This was the opening I had been waiting for. I smiled gently. "Actually, that's a good question, Aunt Carol, and it's part of the reason I wanted to bring you all together tonight," I announced, raising my voice just enough to get everyone's attention. As some of you know, I work as an archivist. I believe in the importance of preserving history, of keeping the record straight. And recently, I realized there's a piece of our own family histo. That has been misrepresented. If you'll indulge me for a few minutes, I've put together a small presentation I'd like to share. A murmur went through the room. My friends looked intrigued. Leo looked like he wanted to be swallowed by the floor. I walked over to the projector I had set up and dimmed the lights. The screen I had bought for the holler flickered to life. "This is a project I started months ago," I began, my voice steady and clear. "I wanted to honor the tradition my grandmother started, a tradition that has always meant so much to me." The presentation began. The first few minutes were filled with the warm, nostalgic images I had so lovingly restored. I could hear soft gasps from my aunt and uncle as they saw pictures of their younger selves, of my late grandmother, of Jessica and me as children. "That was the holler in '98, Uncle Robert murmured, a smile on his face. "I remember that day." I let the happy memories wash over them, reminding them of the foundation of the very tradition my sister and mother had corrupted. Then the tone shifted. The screenshot of the silent group chat appeared on the screen. "In the week leading up to this year's holler," I narrated, "I found it difficult to get any information. As you can see, my questions went unanswered." Next, the phone log of my call to my mother. "So I called my mom directly on Tuesday the 25th. She explicitly confirmed the gathering was, as always, on Saturday the 29th at 2 p.m. Aunt Carol shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Then came the centerpiece of my evidence. Jessica's triumphant social media post from Friday appeared on the screen, the smiling faces of everyone at her party filling the frame. The caption, "So wonderful to be surrounded by everyone we love," was large and impossible to miss. I let the image hang in the air for a moment. The silence in the room was absolute. I then clicked to the next slide, the bleak, lonely photo of my mother's empty house taken from my car on that Saturday. "So you can imagine my confusion," I said, my voice devoid of emotion, "when I arrived at 2 p.m. on Saturday with the ham I had promised to bring to find this." A collective intake of breath came from my friends. Aunt Carol's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with dawning horror. Uncle Robert stared at the screen, his folksy smile gone, replaced by a look of shock and disbelief. Leo wouldn't look up from his plate. He knew all of this, but seeing it laid out so clinically, so irrefutably, was clearly a different experience. I wasn't finished. The screenshot of my mom claiming my ham recipe as her own appeared. I was also confused to see that the ham I spent 2 days preparing was somehow, miraculously, at the party without me, with my mother taking credit for my recipe. The presentation ended with the pictures of my friends, my new community, and the final quote about found family. I turned up the lights. The silence was deafening. No one knew what to say. My friends looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and fierce loyalty. My relatives looked utterly ashamed. Finally, Uncle Robert spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "Victoria, we had no idea." "Didn't you?" I asked, my voice still quiet but now with an edge of steel. "When you all got the email that I never received, did no one think to call or text me to double-check? When you were all at the party on Friday, did not one person ask, 'Hey, where's Victoria?'" Aunt Carol began to cry softly. "Jessica just told us. She said you were busy with work and couldn't make it this year. She said you sent your apologies. We believed her." "Of course you did," I said, nodding slowly. "It was easier to believe her. It's always been easier to just go along with what Jessica wants." I looked directly at Leo. He finally met my gaze, his eyes full of regret. "Vic, I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking. "When you texted me, I just assumed you'd missed the email. I should have called you. I should have known something was wrong. I am so sorry." I gave him a small, sad nod. His apology felt genuine, but it was too little, too late. The damage was done. "I didn't do this tonight to make anyone feel guilty," I said, my voice softening slightly as I addressed the whole room. "I did this because the truth matters, records matter, and I refuse to be erased from my own family's history by a false narrative. My door will always be open to anyone who values honesty and respect. But I am done fighting for a seat at a table where I am not wanted." I looked around at the faces of my friends, my colleagues, my neighbor. Tonight, I wanted to celebrate the family I have chosen and the family that has chosen me. The rest of the evening was quiet but profound. Aunt Carol and Uncle Robert apologized profusely before they left, promising to have a long talk with my mother and Jessica. The story of my sister's betrayal and my mother's complicity was now out in the open, documented, and witnessed. I had not screamed or cried or made a scene. I had simply presented the facts. I had archived their cruelty, and in doing so, I had taken back control of my own story. The fallout from my friends and found family Thanksgiving was both immediate and far-reaching. It was like a seismic charge had gone off in the bedrock of our family, and the fractures spread in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. Aunt Carol and Uncle Robert, true to their word, confronted my mother and Jessica. From what I pieced together later from a very repentant Leo, the confrontation was explosive. Jessica, apparently, flew into a rage. She accused me of being manipulative and theatrical, of trying to turn the family against her. She painted my presentation not as a revelation of truth, but as a calculated attack. She couldn't see the hypocrisy in her own argument, that her own calculated attack had precipitated the entire situation. My mother, predictably, defended Jessica. She claimed the date change had been a simple miscommunication, that she had been so flustered she'd forgotten to call me, that she had made the ham from memory, and it was just a coincidence that it was the same as mine. The lies were flimsy and transparent, and for the first time, some of the family members weren't buying them. The family split into factions. My aunt and uncle were firmly on my side, disgusted by the premeditated cruelty of it all. A few other cousins who hadn't been at the party but heard the story reached out to me with messages of support. Others sided with Jessica and my mom, either out of long-standing loyalty or a desire to avoid drama. They adopted the narrative that I had overreacted, that I had aired private family business in a humiliating way. The family group chat, once a space of forced cheer, became a digital war zone of accusations and passive-aggressive memes before it was eventually disbanded altogether. Jessica and my mother tried to contact me. The day after my dinner, my phone was flooded with calls and texts. Jessica's messages were a torrent of fury. "How dare you try to embarrass me like that? You have always been a jealous, petty little drama queen." My mother's were a masterclass in emotional manipulation. "Victoria, I am heartbroken by what you've done. Your sister is devastated. All we did was change a date. You've torn this family apart over a misunderstanding." I didn't reply to any of them. I blocked their numbers. For me, the conversation was over. I had presented my evidence. Their refusal to acknowledge the truth was their final verdict on our relationship. There was nothing left to say. My silence, I knew, would be more infuriating to them than any angry response I could have given. The most significant change was with Leo. A few days after my dinner, he showed up at my door holding a peace offering, a small, perfectly baked apple pie. "I know this doesn't fix anything," he said, his eyes downcast. "But I wanted to apologize in person. I was a coward, Vic. I knew something felt off, but I didn't want to get in the middle of it. And by not getting in the middle, I chose a side. I chose wrong. I'm ashamed of myself." I looked at him, at his genuine remorse, and I saw a glimmer of hope. He had been weak, yes, but he wasn't malicious. "I appreciate that, Leo," I said, accepting the pie. "It meant a lot that you came to my dinner." We stood in awkward silence for a moment before I stepped aside. "Do you want to come in?" He did. We talked for hours. He told me about the pressure Jessica exerts on everyone, the subtle threats and promises she uses to keep everyone in line. I told him about the years of feeling minimized and overlooked. It was the most honest conversation we had ever had. That day, a new bond was forged between us, one built not on the shaky ground of family obligation, but on the solid foundation of mutual respect and understanding. The holidays came and went. For the first time in my life, I didn't go to the family home for Christmas. The thought of it filled me with a sense of peace, not sadness. Instead, I hosted a small gathering at my apartment with Leo, my friends, and Mr. Henderson. We watched old movies, ate good food, and shared stories. It was quiet, peaceful, and filled with genuine warmth. It felt more like Christmas than any of the loud, tense gatherings of my past. In the months that followed, I learned to live with the new shape of my life. My relationship with a significant portion of my family was gone, likely forever. And while there was a scar there, a tender spot that ached on occasion, it no longer felt like an open wound. The loneliness that had crushed me on that empty porch had been replaced by a quiet strength. I had chosen myself. I had chosen the truth. I had chosen to build a new table rather than beg for scraps from the old one. The antique maps from my grandfather found a place of honor on the wall of my study. They were a reminder of a legacy of love, but also a symbol of my independence. They were the catalyst for the end, but also the beginning. Jessica got what she wanted, a smaller, more compliant family that revolved around her. But in her quest for control, she had lost more than she realized. She had lost the respect of those who saw the truth, and she had lost a sister who, despite everything, had once desperately wanted to connect. My life is different now. It's quieter in some ways, but richer in others. My found family continues to grow. Leo and I are closer than ever. I no longer dread the last Saturday of November. Instead, it has become a new tradition, the annual Friends and Found Family Thanksgiving. It's a day of gratitude, not obligation. It's a celebration of the fact that the most valuable archives we have are not made of paper and ink, but of the people who show up for us, who tell us the truth, and who love us enough to make sure we are never, ever left standing alone at an empty house.